As Naila said, on the flyers, I'm wearing a couple of hats: Labour Councillor, Manchester Council of Mosques, and Sam has already mentioned about Islamophobia, but I will touch upon that first. Basically, the viewpoint from the Manchester Council of Mosques is pretty simple. For Muslims, the Prophet Muhammad's last sermon, peace be upon him, really said it all. This sermon kind of touched upon some of the most important rights humanity has over one another, and I just quote a couple of sentences. Hurt no one, so that no one may hurt you. An Arab has no superiority over a non-Arab, nor a non-Arab has any superiority over an Arab. Also, a white has no superiority over black, and nor a black has any superiority over white. So even 1400 years ago, decent people recognized discrimination, racism, prejudice, bigotry, different words, but at the end of the day, the final kind of what happens is the same. Individuals and communities are demonized, community cohesion is destroyed, it leads to conflict, and in extreme cases, history has taught us it can lead to genocide and Holocaust, the most awful crimes humans can commit against one another. And I suppose we could be forgiven for thinking that in this country we would actually tackling racism and prejudice by legislating in our parliament with laws, but over recent years, as other speakers have said, unfortunately this has been a global thing, and the UK hasn't escaped. Much of this can be attributed to, I suppose, the politics of fear peddled by right-wing parties who have taken the opportunity that mainstream media has given them in terms of giving them exposure on mainstream media. But also I suppose, the global recession, the war on terror, which has led to the rise in Islamophobia, the unrest in the Middle East, which has resulted in kind of millions of refugees, has kind of somehow contributed to this rise in racism and prejudice right across Europe and the world and here in the UK. Now, I just want to go back some 40 years, 42 years to be precise actually, 1974 in my childhood. That's when my family moved from Bradford, where I was born, to Blackburn. Blackburn in 1974, and those of you who may remember, that was a year of the 2 general elections. It was a year with a 3-day week, and it was the year when the National Front was created. The National Front was a predecessor to the British National Party. And in a situation not dissimilar from now, the reason the National Front was created was because Ugandan Asians were expelled from Uganda by Idi Amin, and they came to Britain, and in Blackburn a lot of them actually settled there, and so the National Front was kind of started. Now my parents, unknowingly, unfortunately, we bought a house close to the then leader of the National Front, Kingsley Reid. Now, you can imagine on a daily basis on most school days, and especially on a Thursday and a Friday, because he used to have thugs standing out there, on my way home I was subjected to abuse, all sorts of abuse. And this was with all white friends, because I was one of the first born to kind of parents who kind of emigrated to this country from Commonwealth countries in the mid-60s. So there weren't many Asians or blacks about at the time. I was about the only one in my school actually, I was the only one in the classroom. Now, one day I went into my classroom, and one of my best friends, and I call him John now, I don't want to kind of say his real name just in case he's in an important position now and this goes out and I embarrass him. I heard him say he wanted to join the police force because he wanted to beat up some packies. Now, as I walked in, he saw me and I'd heard this. He turned around and he goes, "No, no, not you, Rabs, you're a good packy." Right? Now, clearly this was John, somebody who, like I said, I was good friends with. We were in the same football team. We were a bit of a potent strike force up front. We used to play together. He'd heard this kind of packy word somewhere, whether it was at home or in his social kind of network after school, and that's why he used it in school. As a family, we never had a TV, we never had a laundry, we never had those big household items that you'd thought a family home should have. And the reason was that most of the Pakistani diaspora, the immigrant diaspora at that time, they felt that they could be sent back anytime, back home. And the reason for that was because, again, some of you may remember Enoch Powell's Rivers of Blood speech. Yeah, this was a very powerful speech that had, for years later, it was a conversation at dinner tables, and people kind of felt that this was going to happen. And it's understandable, because if you're going to get sent back, you can't take away TVs and laundries and cars with you. You can only take away stuff, you know, that is small. And this scenario actually was reinforced by the Ugandan nations who were coming into Blackburn and telling us that they'd had to leave Uganda with their bare essentials, and in some cases, just the clothes on their back. So it kind of reinforced what people were already thinking. Now, actually, it was not until I was about 14, and at parents' evening, and thank God, it was a teacher called Miss Corbett, and she was the one who actually convinced my parents that I had the potential to actually go to university. And that was a pivotal moment in my life, because that meant from that moment our family actually thought Britain was our home, and we were actually here to stay, and we decided to kind of live like a family where Britain was home. And God bless my mum, she finally got a laundry and no more kind of washing in sinks and whatever. Now, and before I go to the next bit, I know some of them Ugandan people who came 40 years ago, and you know, even now I keep in touch with them, and they are making some really positive contributions to British society, public sector, private sector, and the voluntary sector. Now come forward to 2016. It's a bit of a deja vu, isn't it, yeah? We're talking about Enoch Powell, now we've got Farage, we've got Trump, the same rhetoric. This rhetoric is actually drip feeding into our homes. And there are people out there, like my friend John, who are picking this up. Young people are picking this up. So clearly it's having an impact. And I know, no doubt it's having a psychological impact on some of the new rivals. And clearly after the Brexit vote, many Polish people and people from the Eastern European kind of countries have said they don't feel they have a sense of belonging here. So, how do we defeat this evil in our society? I think in some ways harder 40 years on, because we've legislated for it. So what do? Do we ask the CPS or the criminal justice system to look at enforcing these laws more? Do we lobby the government to bring in further legislation? Well, I don't think this present Tory government has a political will, and I really don't know what further legislation can actually do. So really, it's left up to us, the ordinary people, the ordinary citizens of this country, the decent people, to form a movement, to form a coalition, to stand up to racism. And we cannot fight racism or prejudice in isolation. And I'm going to say here something that some people might find controversial, and I think we have to be honest here. I know Muslim people out there who are anti-Semitic, who are homophobic. Heather, she's a good Jewish friend of mine, she's here, she's co-chair of the Muslim and Jewish Forum of Greater Manchester. I'm sure she'll agree with me, there's Jewish people out there who are possibly Islamophobic and homophobic. And the LGBT community will have to accept that there are Islamophobes and anti-Semites amongst them. Now, we have to tackle that as well. Now, why is that happening? I think for the vast majority of reasons that the people hold their viewpoints is because ignorance. We're not engaging with each other in terms of the other minority communities. Here in Manchester, we have an extremely diverse city. We've got a diverse conurbation. I mean, I was 19 when I first met the first Jewish person at university. I think that's too late. But I know out there that is still happening. And that's where I wear my other hat as a Labour councillor. I think we've got a lot of work to do in terms of a city council. We're a fantastic city. We celebrate cultural events right from the north to the south to the east to the west. But I think we've got a lot more work to do in terms of integrating communities. And we cannot fight injustice for one group and not another. Whether that's racism because of your colour or ethnicity or because you're a refugee, discrimination because of your belief, Islamophobia or anti-Semitism, or prejudice because of your lifestyle, homophobia. You cannot dismantle one without the other. So, I'd like to thank Manchester Stand for Racism for organising this rally and actually bringing together all the other anti-racist campaigners in the city, because that is what is needed. We need to build that movement, like you said, and one thing we must never forget is that we are the many, they are the few. racism affects everybody. To build a better society, we have to look out for each other. Thank you very much.